Happy Thursday, or whatever day it is that you are watching this. Yesterday, January 29th, depending on when you're watching this, 2020, I posted on Instagram the question: if you were to fold a piece of paper like this one in half, and then in half again, and then in half again, if you were to do that 48 times, how tall would that piece of paper be? I'll give you 5 seconds. Come up with an answer and write it down. Fold it in half, in half, in half. Theoretically, if you could keep doing this as much as you wanted, which obviously you can't, but if you could, 48 times, how tall would that paper be? Now, I asked this question to my head CrossFit coach yesterday. If you're watching this from Blue Titan, I asked this to Keith. And I said, how tall do you think it would be? And he said, I don't know, as tall as a building, 1,000 feet. Good answer. It's wrong. The correct answer is if you were to fold a piece of paper in half 48 times, it would reach to the moon and back. Think about that. To the moon and back. 50 times, and that piece of paper can reach the sun. That is the power of exponential growth. So how do you get exponential growth in your life? I think it's peer pressure. Now you might be asking, well, isn't peer pressure bad? Well, let's come back to that. I just finished the book Tipping Point, and he talks about raising kids and the power of influence, and essentially you have until your child is about 5 to influence them. And then once your child turns 5 years old, you pretty much lose the ability to influence them. Not completely, but you lose a significant ability to influence your kid. Now, until they're 5, you're responsible for their food, their love, their shelter, their security, their and safety. They have a lack of context or social awareness. They don't know what they don't know. So you're their everything. And it's at this point that many argue that discipline is the most crucial. That a child will test you. If they don't want to eat and you let them not eat, they realize they can get away with it. If they want to scream and be kept up late and you let them stay up late, you let them get away with it. And it's at these crucial first few years that they realize they can do whatever they want if they scream or disobey or whatever. So it's at this point that classical conditioning, that kind of Pavlov, becomes the most important. Now, for those people who don't really have much of a choice and your child needs to go into daycare, that influence ends even earlier, because if your child's in daycare for 8 hours a day, essentially the daycare has more influence over your child. And that is where daycare selection becomes super important. And you may think that you cannot afford the expensive fancy daycare, but you might not be able to afford not investing in that fancy daycare because of the influence that those people, the caregivers and the other kids in that group will have over your child. I'm sure if you're a parent watching this, you're aware of other kids in your kid's school or in daycare that you don't want your kids hanging out with, because when they do, suddenly they adopt some of that behavior. And daycare selection becomes super important. So a lot of the times I talk about people when they're joining my gym or hiring us for coaching, the cost versus the investment. What is it that you cannot afford not to get, as opposed to the cost? What is the return on investment? So once that child enters school, the problem here is that you have no credibility. Dad, you don't understand. Mom, it's different. It's different now than it was when you were a kid. So you've lost that credibility to relate to the child. Who can relate, though, is that peer group. So that saying that you are who you hang out with, well, guess what? It's really true. So let's get back to peer pressure. Now, I'm going to talk about the Breakfast Club here. So my stereotypes, don't be offended by them. They're kind of popularized stereotypes. But is it good or bad? Well, when you're a jock, your peer pressure might be, hey, smoke this cigarette. Have this hit a marijuana. Drink a beer. Now, when I was in high school, I did none of that. My peer group never asked me to drink a beer. I did drink a couple of beers, and it was because of my uncle. So we'll leave it at that. But I never had friends who said, hey, drink a beer. My friends were mostly nerds. And so my peer pressure was more like, hey, you should totally take that calculus class. You could definitely do it. Or, take AP history. Oh, you'll get credits for college. Yo. Like, that was my peer pressure. It was nerd peer pressure. Take the SAT twice. You might get a better score. I'm thinking about cheerleaders. You should totally hook up with that guy. or you should totally wear that dress, or do your hair this way, or, and again, these are popularized stereotypes. So if you're a nerd cheerleader, don't take offense. I'm just like painting with broad strokes here. How about Democrat and Republican? My favorite is the meme that's going around lately from Dumb and Dumber, where Lloyd and what's the other character's name? Anyway, Jim Carrey and the other guy. When he's like, la 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 la, I'm not listening to you. That's kind of like Democrats and Republicans today. You know, I'll give you, here's another great example. I ran an ad. Let's talk about the power of influence. I ran an ad for my kids program, and I had a mom comment on the ad. You will never get a cent of my family's money. You could tell this woman was very mad. She was so mad, in fact, that she commented on every version of my ad. So she made sure to comment on all of them. Something very negative and vitriolic. And her response was essentially, I saw the political poster you had out in front of your gym. Now, mind you, I don't own my property. So my landlord puts a sign in front of my gym, and I can't do shit about it. So he's a Republican, and there's a Republican sign out front. And this woman's like, I'll never give you a cent of my family's money because you support so-and-so, and they support cutting budgets for whatever program in whatever. And I just think about how funny that is, because she is in a different peer group. She is in the left peer group. Now, I kind of consider myself in the middle, but she doesn't know that. She thinks I'm in the right. Her way to convince me to support her point of view is to trash me, tell me she won't support my business, and to do it publicly in an attempt to defame and harm my business. Think about this. How the hell will she get me to listen to her point of view if she's trashing me? So, peer pressure is fascinating in that the people that you find yourself friendly with are able to influence you, but the people who are outside your peer group, their ability to influence is drastically hurt by the simple fact that because they disagree with you, their way of communicating is one that you won't listen to anyway. So it almost strengthens the bond of the people you agree with. So if you're a Republican, your bond is strengthened with other Republicans, even if you don't agree with everything that they say, because the other side, and you could replace Republican with Democrat or whatever category you want, is so angry and vitriolic with trying to get you to change their opinion. So because of that, the group of people you hang out with, even if you disagree with them, their opinion becomes stronger. So yeah, peer groups influence you. Let's talk about your environment. 20% of veterans, they say, were addicted to heroin in Vietnam, yet only 5% remain addicted when they return from service. Why is that? Could it be the environment in Vietnam was conducive to using drugs, but when they returned home, the environment was not? Yet heroin is such an addictive drug. So peer pressure, in my point of view, is not just people, but your environment. There's a broken window theory, and crime in the 1980s was so bad in New York City. There was graffiti and broken windows everywhere, and when this new powers, when they take over, Giuliani and the new police commissioner for the transit system, who eventually, I can't remember his name, Bernard Carrick, I think, eventually became the commissioner for NYPD. Their theory was, let's not go after the murders, let's go after the broken windows and the graffiti. It would take graffiti artists 3 days to graffiti a subway train, a full train. First they did the outline, then they did the colors, then they did the fine details, and every single time the transit police would just paint right over their graffiti, and they had the power of time, and it would just dishearten the criminals. So by going after the small crimes, it impacted the big ones. Why? Well, the theory is that the environment was no longer conducive. That, if every window is broken and there's graffiti anywhere, well, then who the fuck will care if I commit a crime? But if they went after the small ones, then it no longer became okay, and that maybe people would actually go after the crime. Bernie Goetz, 1984, shoots 3 people in a subway cart who were harassing him. Now, those 3 people were bad people, but they hadn't actually done anything other than harass him, and he killed them. He killed 2, I think, and 1 was paralyzed. He was basically acquitted of all crimes. Why? Because New York City was so crime-ridden in the 80s that he was almost like a hero, like a vigilante, as terrible as what he did was, because of the environment. What's the moral of this story? I think peer pressure is the most powerful thing and influence who you are. That you actually are not only who you hang out with, but what you hang out with. And it's my argument that no matter what your age, whether you're a child or an adult, that you should choose very carefully who you hang out with and what environment you surround yourself with. That's my story for today. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. If you like it, please share, comment, like below. If you hated it, comment below, and I'll stop posting stuff like this. Guys, enjoy your Thursday. I'll talk to you soon.